so many different types of titles because the umbrella of UX and CX is so big that companies see them differently.
But it's super interesting this because like this is like the prime example of why working with a career coach that knows your industry becomes really important.
That is one of the first pieces of advice when people are kind of either if they need to redesign their portfolio or they're trying to come up with new portfolio pieces. I tell them, I was like, first you got to find what types of companies do you want to work for. I'm seeing all sorts of unique things like that, like to make it fit. Like I'm seeing on portfolios, people even putting like a 2-minute video on the front being like, this is why you should hire me, and doing like people are really going out of their way to try to like stand out. But I think it's important.
All right, welcome back to this episode of the How to Get a Job podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about how to have a successful career in UX and CX. Maybe even if you're there, how to get promoted, just anything related to those careers. And to talk about that, I have the founder of Shift UX, adjunct professor at Georgetown University, Rajiv. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for the intro. Really excited to talk about anything job related, career related for UX and CX. It's been my bread and butter for a long time. So thank you again for having me on.
No, I love it. I came across your LinkedIn originally, and I always want to bring in experts in a particular field or niche, and I felt like you were the qualified man to talk about UX particularly. And so I'm excited to have that conversation because at least what I've noticed is that the job search process is 80% the same, whether you're trying to go to software engineer, UX, sales, recruiting, doesn't matter, right? But there's 20% that there is difference. And so for me, I wanted to always bring in people who are just expert in their niche, and you're the right fit here. So man, super excited that you're here. So let's get started. What do you think, right, is the biggest difference between getting a job in UX versus getting a job in maybe any other type of career?
Yeah, I would say number one, the way that the market sees UX and CX varies per company. So if software engineer, we all know what it is. If it's a developer, web developer, we all know what it is. Certain social media marketer, we know what that is. It's easily defined. Most job titles are going to have close to the same stuff. But the thing is with UX and CX jobs, I've seen 20 different titles and they all are called different things. One's called UX designer, one's called UX UI, one's called CX. And there's so many different names. And so depending on the company, it's harder to determine, where you would fit in terms of the type of UX at work that you could do. Because there's a lot of different types of, if you're like a designer's designer, you need to get, and you're more artistic and you're more creative and you're kind of more into that prototyping and that kind of stuff, then it's a different set of companies and different set of job titles. And you need to look for someone more strategic, like a UX strategy job or like a UX research job. Again, these are just so many different types of titles because the umbrella of UX and CX is so big that companies see them differently. So you might look at a UX designer job and say, oh, this is going to be a good fit. And then you read the job description, you're like, wait a minute, what? I need to know coding? Like this is weird. Like this, or maybe some other bullet points come across. So I think the difference for people looking into UX and CX is really understand not only, I'm sure you've talked about your personal branding, your value prop, but within the field of UX and CX, you have to get even more specific in terms of just where exactly in the huge umbrella field of UX and CX do you need to, are you going to, are your strengths, are you going to find value, and what types of companies, will align with some of the strengths and skills that you have? Because if you don't, you're going to be you're going to apply to so many jobs that you think are good fits, but in reality, they're not good fits. And then you're just going to be ghosted or you're not going to get any responses. And you're going to be wondering, is this field right for me? So I think that's just a little bit of a distinction, and every field has it somewhat, but it's definitely, I've seen it a lot in the UX and CX field.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I guess my follow-up question on this is like, when you're a software engineer and you're going through the interview process, you're going to go through a coding round. When you are going into management consulting, you're going to go through case interviews. What would be the equivalent to something that's particularly for UX? Is there some sort of different assessments? How are you assessed in those types of skills?
Yeah, I've seen basically two major assessments. One, sometimes you might even go through both, depending on, again, if it's like a huge company. I usually see, portfolio, like you have to do a portfolio review. You usually
Mm.
have to review one of your portfolio pieces end to end, be able to present it, whether it's on your website or whether you have like a deck or a Google slide presentation, whatever it is. That's usually number one. And that's usually earlier on, just to see if you can speak to, hey, what was your impact and what was project, not only what the end result was, but like what was your process? How did you think about it? How did it start? What were the areas that you provided, where you collaborated with other team members? That's usually number one. And then the second one is usually some form of either a take home exercise or a whiteboarding, or what they call a whiteboarding challenge. If it's in person, I've been a part of these many times, which are very nerve wracking. You have to be in front of like a group of people who are interviewing
Mhm.
you, have it in front of a whiteboard, and yeah, and they basically provide the problem to you, and you have to basically wireframe a solution or talk through how you would basically design this, what you're thinking, what your thought process it would be going through this from problem identification all the way to solution. And then the take home, some people just do a take home version of that. So sometimes you have a couple of days to think about it. Like, here's the assignment. It's one page. You got 2 days to basically come up with a site that does X, Y, and Z. Here's the audience. Here's who he needs to serve. Please use our design, please use our style guide and pattern library at this link and use whatever you can. So it's like a lot of times it's like you're doing a quick project for them when it's a take home. When it's live whiteboarding, usually like 30 minutes to an hour. Either way, it's pretty nerve wracking. I've been part of both, and I've been in situations where I had to do all three of those.
Yeah.
But that's the reality in terms of what you have to do in order to like separate yourself from the pack.
But it's super interesting this because like this is like the prime example of why working with a career coach that knows your industry becomes really important. Because I think about how like I've been a career coach for over 10 years. Like so if you're
Yeah,
listening to this, they like my audience has been following knows that. That is why I would never take a UX designer client. Like this is exactly it because I feel like if I would have taken them, I would be doing you a disservice because of the fact that like I couldn't prepare you for a whiteboard interview because I never been there myself, right?
yeah,
And so and I think that's why it's like if you're a management consultant, you should work with somebody who specializes in management consulting. Like if
yeah,
you're a software engineer, I think that we're really good. We have a very good technical team. That's where like I would say one of the things that made our program really great is because we have two technical coaches that are
yeah.
I don't know
Perfect.
if you know what Leak Code is, but it's how you
Oh,
where you practice.
yeah, yeah. I've heard of
So
it. But
our technical coaches inside of our program were in the top 0.1% of all people on Leak Code,
yeah,
right? So
that's
like
amazing.
that's kind of like how you set you apart. So I love that you're sharing those examples because it's exactly like if you're listening to this and you're looking for a coach, I was like, I would be first is how long have they been doing? Do they have success stories? And I was looking at one of the things that attracted me to messages like you have those featured on your LinkedIn, which is super good.
Yeah,
I can see that.
yeah,
But two, do they are they in the industry? How well are they familiar with the industry? And so that's really awesome. I want to
yeah.
kind of shift to something you said about alignment, right?
Mhm.
So when I think about UX, I think about like you're essentially an artist, right? Like there's an element of art there, and as an artist, we have different styles. So how important is it that you are finding companies that are aligned with your design style?
Yeah,
Because like when I look at like different platforms or the way that Apple is versus Google is, it's still there's the same service, but one is more cluttered and it has more. The other one is
yeah,
more
yeah.
slick and minimalist. How important is that when you are applying for companies?
Yeah, I would say the advice that I would give is if you're first starting out, um, I would say do not attempt to go. I mean, get inspiration from Google's, Airbnb's, Microsoft's, whatever those. Uh, like you said, Apple's. Get the
Yeah,
inspiration from them. Don't shoot for those jobs because when you're first starting, you're going against people that are going to have 10, 15 years, probably like a master's or a PhD and whatever, and have a lot of experience.
yeah,
Get inspiration from them. If you're first starting, definitely align yourself with the smaller companies. You'll learn more, you'll grow more. Like if it's a startup or someone that just getting their design system or style guide that's kind of rough and not quite there yet, you might be like, oh, why are they doing that? But like you have the opportunity to potentially work with them to kind of shape that. Initially, you gain a lot of experience. Then from there, you can be like, okay, let me look at the kind of the design mature companies, like,
Yeah.
the Apples or the Googles, or maybe not that high, but maybe another step. And then you can say, okay, I'm going to align myself to who I think, culturally, design wise, like, from a visual element, from, does what the work that I've done match, what I need to get to. But yeah,
Yeah.
start with the ones who you might think are even kind of rough, because you have the opportunity to go and influence and change it. And then you can kind of step up and,
Yeah.
go to those bigger companies. Yeah.
So one thing I think we're really both aligned is how do we provide our unique value proposition, right? And I have an example of a mentee of mine that really wanted to be a game designer for EA, and we were brainstorming ideas, and we came up with this like saying, okay, like what is your favorite EA game? Like so, Electronic Arts, right? And so he designed himself and his resume. First, he designed himself as the character in the
Wow.
game, right? Like, so he like, yeah, I want to be a character designer. Let me show you that I can design. And he designed himself in the character. And then it was one of those games where there's like every character had different strengths and weaknesses. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a big video game, but the way he explained it to me, like imagine Mario Kart, because I know what Mario Kart
Yeah.
is,
I've
and like
seen, I played it. I have it.
like Mario is like always in the middle, and then there's
Yeah.
some that are faster, but are like it's harder to navigate. And then you have Donkey Kong, which is slower, but it's super easy to navigate. So he designed his like tech skills and all of that, like all his like skills, and he made it that way. And I remember that like really impressed the recruiting team, which then led to an interview. Do you recommend your clients to do those types of projects where you have your portfolio, but your portfolio is maybe open to like, it's like you're working on different projects that you worked in school or your boot camp or on your personal time. But I'm talking about projects that are particularly built for a company, right?
Yes.
Like you're like,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on those type of things?
I 100% agree. And that, in fact, that is one of the first pieces of advice when people are kind of either if they need to redesign their portfolio or trying to come up with new portfolio pieces. I tell them, I was like, first, you got to find what types of companies do you want to work for? Do you want to work in the fintech industry, maybe educational tech? Do you want to work at one of the big SaaS tech, companies? Is it gaming industry? Is it
Mm,
green or energy tech or whatever the case may be? Align yourself in what your interests are, and from there, come up with a short list of those types of companies and design your portfolio around that. Because at the end of the day, people will hire uh, based off of whatever is closest to the domain expertise that they're looking for. So, like, if you're trying to go for a fintech company and you want to go for like the Capital One Bank, but all your experience is in video games, it's going to make no sense. And they're going to obviously choose someone who has fintech experience, maybe who
yeah,
worked at another bank or worked at another, uh, uh, let's just say like a cryptocurrency company
yeah,
or whatever the case may be. They're obviously going to go to them. So I always tell people, find the interest that you have, double down on that interest, lead with that case, that case study and that portfolio, at least one, for your primary one, maybe your secondary one too. Then you go for those companies, because at the end of the day, they're going to go for the people that provide them the most confidence that they can do the job well. They're not going to hire some random person and just guess and think like, oh, this person's, seems nice, I'm going to hire them. No, they hire based off of like confidence in the skill that you can do the job for what their company does. And so I
yeah.
totally agree with your example is like the perfect example of what I do depending on the industry. And I tell, many of the people in my career advisory program to do that exact same thing.
I agree. It's so awesome because I think what you're like, it's important to understand, right? Is that every company has limited resources. So anytime a company is making a hiring decision, they're determining if I'm hiring you, I can't use that money for anything else. I can't buy more software. I can't buy more
Exactly.
ads. I can't buy equipment. And so
Yeah.
every time it's all about how do I mitigate the risk? What's my risk versus the reward in hiring? And that's
Yep.
why companies hire people from similar industries, because past performance is a really good indicator of future performance. So anytime you can show them and mitigate the risk, and I think whether that's why like whenever you can create a project that's built for that particular company and you can say okay, there's you mitigate the risk that you're a good character designer because you just did it, right? Or
Yep.
I have another example which is not as closely related to what you do, but they wanted to be a podcast producer, and I said make a podcast, it's free. And if
Yeah.
you could make a podcast, kind of say, why do you want to work there? 10 reasons why I wanted to work there. Like what 10 reasons why I want to work at Sweetfish Media.
Hmm.
10 reasons why Sweetfish Media should hire me. And
Yeah.
then instead of letters of recommendation, literally had people like their old bosses record why they should like why was she a good employee.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
And
seeing all sorts of unique things like that, like to make it fit. Like I'm seeing on portfolios, people even putting like a 2-minute video on the front being
yeah,
like, this is why you should hire me and doing like people are really going out of their way to try to like stand out. But I think
yeah,
it's important because in this market, it's a saturated market in terms of especially in the UX and CX industry, it's saturated and you can't if you want to get the same results of just no responses, then just do the same basic stuff. But if you want to kind of get noticed, you got to go kind of above and beyond and do extraordinary things in
yeah.
shocking ways, even sometimes to get noticed.
So with talking about going above and beyond, what's your thoughts on networking for this industry? Is that as important in networking here as it is in pretty much every other industry?
Yes, I mean that's I can, I'd say it's definitely the most important. But at least I'm not sure how it is for you. But when I work with people, it's definitely the hardest because there's no instantaneous reward from networking. And what I mean by that is like you don't immediately get a job interview from networking. You're playing the long game.
Yeah,
And to not get the kind of the your dopamine fix of like some sort of great thing that happens like, if you apply to 25 straight jobs and you get one response, oh my God, that's amazing. When you're networking, you're doing it for the long game. You're doing it for 3 months, 6 months. It's a lifelong thing. It's not just to land a job. You're literally going to be doing this when you're on the job, when you're off the job, in between jobs. I mean, so I always say it's definitely the most important thing, but it's almost like a separate track that you have to just, if you haven't started yet, you have to just start literally, if you haven't done it, you have to start today. And you have
yeah,
to kind of plant the seeds of just people, whether it's, again, listening to podcasts, joining workshops, going to conferences. I mean, there's so many messaging people, of course, and picking their brain for 10, 15 minutes, if they have the time. All of the above is what I kind of recommend. I kind of tell people how to do it kind of in a little bit more of a sequenced fashion, just so they're not
yeah.
like throwing so much at them at once. But I tell them like, you got to start now and you got to do it like right when you're in the beginning of the program, because you can't be like at the end of the program being like, all right, let's start networking for 1 month and I'm going to get a job. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. Like you got to start like immediately. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's absolutely, it's 100% very, very important.
What are your do you have fears in the UX industry that how will you think AI will be affecting these jobs, and how should people be starting their careers start thinking about like is there a way to upskill themselves, or what do you think on in this scenario?
Yeah, so two things here. It's definitely going to affect the field of UX, like in the creative aspect, in terms of how fast you can produce designs. I would say number one, in order to upskill yourself, learn the AI tools. But I think for some reason, people, at least when I've talked to a lot of people in the UX and CX field, they seem to be kind of hesitant. They're like, "Oh, it's not. I don't think it can ever take over my job," or like, "We're a very, we're a different type of field." Like everyone wants to say that, but it is very, very powerful. And I think the best way to kind of avoid that is basically just go ahead, heads down, and just try the different tools. I think I've used like 20 different tools, and I try to use them all the time. Some of them are horrible. Some of them are good. Everyone knows all the kind of the
Yeah,
main ones, but you have to skill yourself to use them, because like they always say, AI is not going to, disrupt or replace the jobs of UX and CX people, but it will disrupt and replace the people who don't have AI skills. That's the for sure.
ah,
So
yeah,
if you're a UX and CX person being like, I'm not gonna have the AI skills, yeah, then you will be out of a job. But if you learn the technology and use it to your advantage for your job, you're safe. You're much safer.
yeah.
So that's what I say.
What advice would you have in terms of getting visibility to your application?
So I have a multi-step approach in terms of getting so what in my program I have like basically a 4 different ways how you land a job. And this is really with anything. I've Correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen any other way you can land a job. So I think the easiest way to get a job, and I'm not saying this applies to everyone, the easiest way to get a job is if you're already within a company in a separate job and you go for a job within the same company. So like let's just say if I'm a marketing analyst within, Capital One or some company, and I apply for the a UX job opening within Capital One. They're going to
Yeah,
look at the people internally number one over everyone else. Second on that list, who after that, then they look at obviously people who are references. So obviously we know or like sorry, not references, referrals.
referrals. Yeah, yeah,
So obviously that's a common strategy. And then getting people, connecting with enough people over time, again, doing the networking to get the referral is going to be very important. The third is basically working with recruiting companies. So, excuse me, it's got to working with basically recruiting or placement firms. Let them do the dirty work for you. You want to be able to connect with them because they're going to essentially find a lot of different roles for you, forward it to you when they, they're going to have an initial discussion with you to talk about what your strengths, what your weaknesses are, what type of role you're looking for. Let them go do the work. Let them go find the roles for you. Then it's much more matched and aligned to your skills and strengths. And then the fourth lowest chance is, the cold applications, just reaching out kind of on LinkedIn messaging, or if you find emails going. Now there are better ways to get better responses doing that method. Although I never tell people to lead with that method. I tell people 80% of your work should be, your effort should be done in the other ones.
Yeah, like the hidden job market kind of thing. Yeah.
Excuse me. Yep.
Absolutely. So like, just to recap those four, I think those were so good that you just said. So like, first is internal transfer, right? So like the company already knows who you are. They can look at your record and they can see, okay, he's a great employee. And a lot of times companies will pay for your upskilling. So like, if maybe
Exactly.
you don't have the skills to get there today, but a lot of them will have tuition reimbursement or are willing to train you and get you to that level. So to your second point, and correct me when I'm wrong on if I'm wrong on these, it's more like referrals. Like, who do you know? Like the hiring manager has an opening, he'll first say, who do I know from my connections, or who does my
Exactly.
team know? So like right now we're hiring a appointment setter. And to your point, if you look at our internal Slack channel, we said, team, we have this many people, we have a referral bonus before I even posted anywhere else, because
Exactly.
our team knows exactly what's required to be successful in this company. They know the culture and the values of it. So that like all of that increases the success of that hire, right? Going back to the investment.
Yep.
You said third was working with recruiting agencies, whether maybe they place you, or the staffing agencies, or you start as a contract and then you're converted
Country.
into
Yeah.
full time.
Exactly. Yep.
And then fourth is cold applying. I've seen it for me, my personal. I don't know how if UX is different. I've seen it the last two flip. So it goes internal referrals, cold applications, and then agencies. Because at
Okay.
least for my side, it's like the companies are avoiding to pay that fee. But the more technical you do, the more technical the role is, the more the companies are willing to pay that fee because the agencies have a pipeline of candidates.
Yeah. Yeah. So
And then the
it
fifth
is
one,
similar. Yeah.
just to joke around, is create your own job. Like create the role yourself. Like, and
Yeah.
that, the smaller the company, the more you can do that. You can be like,
Yeah.
hey, but anyways, I wouldn't focus on the fifth one unless you're very entrepreneurial and have that mindset.
Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, doing cold outreach, now you can even further divide that to like total cold outreach, just applying to 100 jobs on LinkedIn Easy Apply when you're sitting
Yeah.
at night and scrolling through your phone. Like that's
Mhm.
one way of cold applying, but there's also much slightly warmer ways of colder applying, like reaching
Yeah.
out to the hiring manager, messaging,
Mhm.
email. Better response rate, obviously, but it needs to be more targeted to the companies. Like I would never ever tell people to apply to more than 100 jobs. Like most of the
Yeah.
people that have landed the jobs, it's all been like less than 30, less than 20, less than 30. So yeah.
Yeah. I would love if you can maybe share a little bit about what Shift UX and how do you work with job seekers? What's the program look like, and how can someone that's interested that wants to learn more reach out?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, how it works is, so quick backstory. I'll just give kind of the 2 minute
Yeah.
spiel. Is that I was a career changer myself. I was in various careers for the first 10 years after college. I was in sales. I was in marketing. I was in event planning. I did a bunch of stuff. Realized I was a didn't fit, kind of square peg round hole. I decided to make a career change, and over the last 10 years, I've been in the field of UX, and over that course of time, I've done a lot of work. I've, through up and down the seniority level, and I've done a lot of coaching, like one-on-one, like mentorship, that type of stuff. But it always came down to like a lot of the same issues in terms of people trying to change careers and trying to land a job in, especially within the field of UX and CX. It came down to a lot of the same concerns. It's um, how do I start like in learning in this field? And it's usually like some sort of boot camp or certificate course or going back to school or being self-taught. But then once you do that, that's still only, one part of the equation. Usually people think that's going to be enough. Knowledge is enough to just like kind of get you to the ultimate finish line. It's never enough. You have to be able to apply that knowledge. And so that's where I come in terms of how can I help you apply the knowledge that you already know refine and create like an elite level profile, basically.
Yeah.
So from your LinkedIn, from your resume, your portfolio, and then really get a clear value prop statement and personal brand. So where are you going to fit in the whole UX CX universe?
Yeah.
And so that's where I help. And so over, it's like a 3 to 6 month program. When you join, you can essentially, we'll talk about exactly where you're looking for, what types of companies, where your strengths, where are you right now and where do you want to be? What is your biggest challenge? What do you think you're going to struggle with? And I can basically set a good timeline, specific strategy in place for you. You'll join a community of people that are in the same boat. Again, many people from whether you have a couple years of experience to there's people that have like 30 years of experience changing careers. Like you can see on my LinkedIn profile, there's someone who was a teacher for 30 years, landed a job. So it doesn't really matter kind of where you are in terms of if you're changing a career, if you're just starting out, or if you're trying to change careers after a long time. I'm happy to talk to people to kind of go through my advisory program in a step-by-step way to help place you and land jobs. Because at the end of the day, it's not just like I'm landing a job. A lot of these people, it's like their livelihood. It's like it's a life transformation. They're doing this
Yeah.
for something sometimes even bigger than themselves. Sometimes it's for their family, or for their kids, for their spouse. So to me, it's very important. And anyone can get in touch with me. Obviously, I have a free guidebook from my website. They can go to shiftux.co and download the free guidebook just to see what I have to say. And then you can obviously go on my LinkedIn profile and you can see, hey, what are some of these success stories? What are some of the content that I post about? And you can even, and if you want to book a call with me, I have even a free 12-minute video that you can see what are my strategies. I have like a system in place that basically covers all these things that I just talked about in a methodical way. And once you do that, then I think once you get a job, a lot of things change. People still come back to me even after they get the job. They're like, "Hey, can I get back into that module 7 where you like told me how to do an outreach?" I'm like, "All right, fine, no problem. I get back in there." So it's not just people landing jobs, but people who have landed jobs, they also come back to me because the advice sticks to really anyone in kind of any level of the career. So yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. Awesome. Awesome. So I'll put all the links to your LinkedIn, to your website. Your website is super clean, obviously. And so that book is actually free. 5 Costly Mistakes You
Yep.
Must Avoid When Pursuing a High-Paying UX Design Career. So
Yep.
make sure you can download that book. For all of you listening, look, if you enjoyed this episode, if you know someone in the UX field or wants to go into the UX field, please go ahead and share this episode. Like, subscribe. Thank you all so much for listening, and catch you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.